I said, why can't I be a regular soldier? He says, no, wake up. He says, you got the wrong shaped eyes, you got the wrong skin. He says, everything is wrong. He says, you can't be a soldier. People like you aren't soldiers.
So I go back to history, 1943. So we did not want to be a segregated unit. We wanted to be integrated and be like everybody else. But because we had the face of the enemy, they segregated us so that they could monitor our progress.
I was singled out in a class, and this drill instructor tells me, stand up. Hey, you, I don't even know if you knew me. This I can't remember that well, but he goes, stand up. This is what a gook looks like. Just turn around so everybody can see you. So I'm turning around going, great, I'm having a hard enough time here, just holding my own mug, and now I'm going to be the example.
So Captain Burns, who later became governor of Hawaii, came to Aya Gym, and he said, pointed at us and said, you are on the spot. You must volunteer to prove your loyalty. Well, I didn't take that very kindly. I felt I was a loyal American, born in America, went to American school and spoke like an American. So my analogy was, if you walk like a duck, quack like a duck, and swim like a duck, you must be a duck, and I must be an American. So at first I refused to volunteer.
Oh, I didn't enlist. No, I tried to enlist in October of 1940, when they were first trying to get people into the Army, but they refused to let me join because I was Asian. And then when the draft occurred, my number was one of the first draftees. And so I was accepted in the military, but I soon learned that they didn't take us because they wanted to, they took us because they had to.
I received a letter from War Department telling me that they're going to organize a Nisei interpreters group. Are you still interested in serving the country? That took me quite a while. Go, not to go, go, not to go, go, not to go. Again, after several weeks of mulling over, since I am a citizen, and as a citizen I have obligation to meet, so I decided to join up.
Ocean Miyake of Los Angeles said, volunteer? Heck, no. Why should I volunteer when my wife, my children, and my parents are in relocation camps? So he didn't volunteer, he got drafted.
I went into the Army to be truthful because I felt that that was the only way we could keep from getting kicked out and sent to Japan.
As we grew up from kindergarten, this friend of mine, Bob Madrid, we used to talk about joining the Marines as we went through grammar school. So I called Bob Madrid from Redlands and told him, I'm going to join, do you want to go? And he jumped on a bus, and next day we were Marines.
I'm the youngest of 10 kids, and I have 6 older brothers. I'm the 7th son, and all of them served in the military. 2 fought in Europe with the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, and another older brother, Roy, served with the 1st Marine Division in Korea, was at a place called the Chosin Reservoir. And so, although my brothers never really discussed the war with me, as a kid, I thought military service was an obligation. It was not a question of me not serving. It was just a question of when and whether or not I'd have to serve during the time of war.
We were all very, very much aware of the disadvantages of being Asian. None of us felt that we were inferior psychologically, physically, mentally, or spiritually. We felt the system was dead set against us. But we all knew that we had to be as good as any other Caucasian outfit. And we all had to toe the line and do our best. That we all knew. And we knew that we had to shed blood. That was the price we were going to pay. And we all had to be prepared to pay that price.
The normal thing would probably have said, the hell with the United States. You're going to do this to me? I don't want to fight. You know, I'm not going to go risk my life. You don't give me my constitutional rights to begin with, so why should I follow the Constitution? But I tell them that, hey, that's a normal thing to do. But to the Japanese Americans, for me, it was abnormal times. It was a time that we had to do things that were not normal.
Then he says, do you feel like an American? Oh, yes, I do. Say, well, do you know that a cat born in a fish market isn't a fish? So I told him, yes, but the cat belongs to the fish market, like I belong to the United States, you know.
In the Korean War, the politicians in Washington were able to dictate to a greater degree than any other war how the war should be fought. And so they put limits and they dictated the terms of how we would fight.
America is calling me to see what I can do. Like I said, I didn't know what communism was, especially in Hawaii. Nobody knew what communism was.
And when I got hit, you know, these Hakujins, I said, hey, you know, I wanted them to help me or put me on a truck or an ambulance or whatever. And I would say, hey, and they would look at me and, you know, I'm Asian, and they thought I was just South Korean or whatever. And they would just go right by, and so I wasn't getting any help.
So I just gave him a hug and told him I had to go, and we jumped back in the Jeep, and he was killed just a few hours after that. So I've never been the same from that. Years ago, I used to dream, and I see him walking down the road. As you see, you see pictures of soldiers heading towards a battle of some kind, and they're walking down the side of the road one by one on a single file, and that's the way it was that day. And you just wonder if, you know, if when I'm seeing in my dreams, I see him walking down in that file, and I yell at him, "Hey, Bat!" That was his nickname. "Bat, don't go, you know. You're going to get killed up there. Don't go. Something's going to happen." And he just my dreams, he looked back at me and keep going.
Ladies would come out and peddle their goods, but they would see me and they'd come up and they'd touch me and smile and say, same, you, me, same.
In the first few months I was there, I was thinking, I'm an American, I'm not Vietnamese. I'm trying to make this distinction here. And I maybe subconsciously or unconsciously, I'm trying to show the other guys I'm with that, hey, I'm not them, you know, make sure. I'm not about that.
After getting off the plane, I said, I have to go to this base. So I got on the bus by myself, went to base all by myself. It's a weird feeling. You know, I said, what am I doing here? I was supposed to be with other soldiers fighting the war. I'm not supposed to be alone like this. It's a sick feeling. It's, you know, sick.
When I found out when I got there in combat was not, by this time I was 40 years old, 41, towards the end of my career. We realized that combat was not something for the elderly. It was, well, it's not for anybody, I should say. Yeah. It wasn't pleasant over there at all. I probably had more apprehensions at age 40 than I would have had as a young and stupid when I was, 19, 20. But we had a mission to accomplish, and I had no qualms about that. But I also realized that we had no business over there.
We had to go to the restroom, and there was only the colored and whites only. And as the whites line were so long, the Hawaii boys started to use the colored section indiscriminately. Like in Hawaii, there was no discrimination. So after several weeks, the Colonel Pence called the companies together and said that the people of Hattiesburg are very disturbed that we are using colored section in the buses, colored section in the restrooms, etc., and that we should use the whites only. So one of the boys says, why? So Colonel Pence says, because you're more white than black.
Aside from this thing about the enemy looking like us, and aside from having to watch almost on a daily basis the abuse of Vietnamese civilians by American personnel, there was always that very real possibility that some FNG, some new guy, that was the terminology. You'd have to think about going out and taking a shower because you take off your uniform, and to some FNG, you're just another gook.
We went to a rear area to take a shower, and my dog tags were taped, so they don't rattle at night. And I had taken them off so the tape wouldn't get wet. And I guess I just forgot to put them back on, and I lost them. Well, I was afraid. After I thought about it, I thought, geez, if I were out, and say he got killed, and no one knew, someone that I really knew wasn't with me, I would have probably been just thrown in a ditch as the enemy.
A big black staff sergeant came in, saw me there, naked, taking a shower or trying to rush through the shower to get outside, and apparently he thought I was Vietnamese, or I certainly was not an officer because I looked like a little teenage boy there. And he just threw me around. I got slapped, I got kicked, and he said, well, I'm not going to repeat what he actually said to me, but very heated words were hurled at me. And I finally was able to calm him down and say, listen, you may not believe this, but I'm a new lieutenant. I just came aboard. My name is Lieutenant Miyoshi, and I have a right to be here in this shower. At first he didn't believe me, but then he got to thinking, if he really was an officer, I'm in a deep pile of you know what. So he kind of backed off, and I told him, listen, I want you in my office tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. sharp, in front of my desk, to straighten this out. You got that, Sergeant?
The A team I was on, the soldiers were all professional soldiers, except we had a lot of racism. We had one black guy, one black, one Asian, and the rest were 10 guys were white. Usually the white guys are pretty good, but this team, I got this funny feeling as soon as I walked in. These guys were rednecks. They didn't like anybody black, Asian, or Hispanic, and I felt that. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, the captain came up to me. He says, Sergeant, he never even called me by my first name. He says, Sergeant, you're going out on a mission. I said, well, who's going to go with me? He says, no, you're going out by yourself. Okay, you're going to go tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock, 0600 hours, that's 6 o'clock in the morning. I said, what do I take out? He said, well, you figure out something. So I didn't get any help from the captain. I didn't get any help from the top sergeant. And so I went to this black sergeant. His name is Sergeant Red, R-E-D-D. He said, look, this is what you do. And he took me outside and he says, this is your interpreter. He introduced me to my interpreter. Okay, this is your M16. This is your ammunition. This is the food you have to take out. He told me exactly what to take out. And then a couple of weeks after, our white captain sent a black soldier out on a mission. It's called BDA, Bomb Damage Assessment Mission. Sergeant Charles Red, the black sergeant, said, hey guys, I gotta go out tomorrow. And so my junior medic and I said, Sergeant, how about one of us going with you? Because one of the Green Beret policies is if American goes out, you should always have a backup American. You should have at least two. So we told Sergeant Red, how about one of us going with you? He said, look, I know that. I just talked to the captain, trying to get one of you guys to go with me. He said no. So the other guy, Sanders, the white partner, and I went down to the captain, and we said, Captain, why don't you let one of us go? And the captain said, no. We said, why? Because that's the one I wanted. So he called back to us, back to the base. He said, he was, that the Vietnamese soldiers that he had all fled, ran away. The only soldier who was with him was his interpreter. And so they were running away. And after that, we lost radio contact. And so another unit called a Mobile Strike Force came to our camp 2 days later, went down to the general area looking for him 2 or 3 times. And so I was asked to go out with the Mike Force to look for him. So I did, and we found him and put him in a body bag and sent him home.
So I walked out into like a typical small town outside the gates of Camp Hansen, and I see these guys lined up, and they're all in line, like they're waiting to go see a movie, in front of these prefab kind of small cinder block kind of structures. And there's a large window, and I looked in, and there's a family sitting around eating dinner. around a table, sitting on the floor, and they're eating. And the father is telling the daughters to hurry up and eat and go finish their work, because there's like 10 guys standing at the doorway in line. The guy had 2 or 3 daughters, and that's all they did was they were prostitutes. And that kind of was very weird to see, because it was like looking in on my family.
Yes, I was called many names. Racial epithets were thrown at me. As I told some other people, I was placed on a podium one day near the end of OCS, and I was called a gook, and then the sergeant told my fellow candidates, this is what the enemy looks like, and kill it before it kills you, and growl for me, gook. And this is all done in a light, bantering, party atmosphere. I did, and once I graduated, I never was called any derogatory term of any kind in my entire tour following the graduation of OCS. I had the support of my fellow peers for the entire tour. I realized that there was discrimination not only in the Marine Corps, but in society in general, ever since the 40s and 50s and through the 60s. But I believe that if one really just put out, you're going to gain that respect. I'm a firm believer that you can't legislate respect, you can't sue for it, you can't force somebody to respect you, you just got to earn it. And I learned that in my earlier years. You just got to buckle down and apply yourself. And like magic, things start happening very positively.
When I was eligible for promotion from captain to major, we were in the same group to be promoted. I didn't make major, and I got passed over. And Tom Clifford called me and told me exactly what had happened. And he said, "It's your picture." I said, "What do you mean, picture?" He said, "Come on, Bob, you know better than that." And then it dawned on me what had happened. You know, the picture, here I was, an Asian, right? You know, the first item in the folder. And a few years prior to that, on all our personnel records, in our, there used to be a form in there, what your race was. Well, they deleted that. So you couldn't tell what race you were. But in place of that, they put a photograph in your personnel folder. Well, what had happened was, after I got passed over, my squadron commander was very shocked. He couldn't understand why I got passed over. Told the personnel people why we were there. We wanted to see the folder and see what we can find that might be derogatory as to why I failed to make major. So this young officer comes out, and so he looks through the whole thing and he closes the folder, and he says 95% of the time I could tell why somebody got passed over for promotion. But he says, in your case, I don't know what happened. He said, using his scoring system that whatever he used, however, he says, you should have been promoted. Colonel Hancock and I, on the way home, after we got home, we jumped back in the airplane and got home, he said, "Okay, Bob, we'll take care of this. You're going to make the next promotion." And what he did was every 3 months, rather than writing an annual efficiency report, he wrote a special one for me on every 90 days. And so then next promotion, sure enough, I got promoted, and then that was to major, and then to lieutenant colonel. I made it right on time.
Who do you want to command this division? You're going to pick somebody like me who stands 5'4", or you're going to pick this strapping guy who looks like a football captain and good looking and everything else, you know, and the troops will rally around, you know, get gung-ho about. We're going to talk about equal opportunity, or we're going to talk about winning a war. I mean, which one is better to inspire these troops to go out there and perform? You know, surely both of them could do it, but when you're faced with making that choice, which one are you going to pick? You know, yeah, the guy that gets picked might turn around and says, "Hey, you're going to be my chief of staff. Come on," because he needs somebody with brains. But when you pick something like this, I don't think we can kid ourselves. Is there a glass ceiling? You know, I don't think it's an intentional glass ceiling or anything else. I think it's human nature being what it is. There's going to be something like that there. You're going to pick the one that looks the most outstanding. And most Caucasians, lucky for them, they're physically big and they're good looking. And Orientals are kind of smaller, and when it comes to leading men in combat, I mean, which one are you going to pick? The big athletic type or this little guy? The fighter pilot, now that's different. He's up there by himself, and the lighter guy would probably do a better job.
He couldn't talk because his jaw was shattered and he had bandages around his head. Well, in combat, again, you don't see this in the movies, but when a guy is hit bad, the medics will strip you. Because if you can't talk or you're semi-conscious, you can't tell them where you're hit. So they take off all your clothes to see if you're hit in the back or anywhere else. So this guy is stripped down now to his skivvies and his boots. And they shoot him up with morphine to stop the pain. But he's still lucid. And he said he remembers being put on the evacuation chopper along with an African American, one of his buddies. And the chopper has a hard time getting enough altitude, and they're taking fire. So the pilot turns around and tells the crew chief, "Jettison the gooks, jettison the gooks." So the crew chief starts throwing the North Vietnamese out of the helicopter. And according to the kid that's telling me the story, they're maybe 300 feet off the ground now. That's a long first step. So tossing these guys out of the chopper means you're throwing them to their deaths. And so he's kind of watching this in a morphine haze. And then he said, all of a sudden, he said, this big white boy crew chief grabbed me. And he started dragging me to the edge of the chopper. He said, man, I grabbed onto that dude's arms and I wouldn't let go. And he's trying to shake me loose and throw me out of the helicopter. And he says, the black man, the black soldier, the African-American soldier, his buddy, says, hey, leave him alone, he's an American. So the crew chief says, sorry about that.
Lots of mainland folks, my contemporaries in the Marine Corps, really didn't hear too much about the 442-100, or maybe didn't care, you know. And so I found myself having to educate a lot of my contemporaries. If your commander or the NCO in charge of you in an operation felt that Asians, for some reason, can see better in the dark, or have better vision, or know how the enemy thinks because he's Asian, and you're placed on point, or rear guard, or your flanks, because of that stereotype, yeah, you stand a better chance of getting killed. I think Asians have the problems that blacks do not have, that Latinos do not have, particularly since I spent a lifetime in the Marine Corps. I don't believe that any minority, and particularly at this point in our, the Marine Corps' history, that any Asian Americans should be treated in that fashion. We called names and inappropriate references to the ethnicity. That sort of thing should have gone away in the 60s when AJs signed up and in all of the services and served with honor.
It was miserable. The only good thing about it was you were so damn wretched that you form attachments and affections for some of these men that I think are closer and stronger than the bonds you might feel for your biological brother. You are, and perhaps this is perverse, but the one thing that I miss about the military, and the one thing I miss about the Vietnam War, one of the very few times in life where it didn't matter if you had money. Money couldn't buy you anything out in the jungle. And so your status in the platoon or the company was based on how well you did your job and what kind of a person you were and how much character you had. And that was kind of nice. In the war in Vietnam, I was surrounded by men who would die for me. And I for them, without any hesitation. It was like a routine thing where men would expose themselves to enemy fire and risk almost certain death to try and go out and save a buddy. That can't be duplicated in civilian life. So that was perhaps one of the few positive things about the war. It brought out the very worst in a person, but it also, I think, at certain times brought out the very best in a person.
Mostly the enemy in my company is a heavy weapons outfit, so we usually get into position by telephone or by walkie-talkie. And somehow they had to catch on with us, so they must have had English-speaking German boys. After we found that out, we used our own language, Hawaiian word, hey, go mauka, makai, or the baga maki already. This kind of talking, and they couldn't catch on. For example, a guy would say, we do it in Hawaiian all the time. He would say, you keep going, I'll be there along with you. Say, you go stay go, and I will come too. I go stay come. That's Hawaiian pigeon knife. You know, you go stay go, then you keep going, I will be coming after you. You go stay go, and I go stay come. Now this kind of talking, and I don't think you would understand.
There was a general there who did this. The first thing, he was assigned to Kauai, where we were stationed. He issued a general order saying that none of the Niseis would be allowed to visit their parents who were not American citizens. Well, you know, we completely ignored that because we felt that, oh, this guy was a stupid general. And so what? If we get caught, we get caught, you know. But we're not going to ignore our parents just because this guy from New York has this bias.
The soldier kept making motions, and finally I realized what he wanted. He wanted us to unbutton his breast pocket, and so we were able to unbutton it. And we pulled out his wallet, and he was so weak he could hardly, you know, but he wanted us to open the wallet, and we opened it, and finally it was a picture, and we could tell it was his mother, and he was trying to. None of us could speak German, but I think from just his tone of voice and everything else, we knew he wanted us to tell his mother what happened. We thought that, and you know, when you fight an enemy, often he's quite distant from you. He's almost a non-object. He's not a human being. He's just something out there. And he's shooting at you, you're shooting at him. But, and this happened to be the case here. But when you pick him up and bring him up there, and you're trying to stop his bleeding, trying to keep him alive, and he's trying to tell you what to tell his mother in a foreign language you can't understand, and he's just younger than any of us, you know. We suddenly realize that, you know, we're fighting human beings.
I like to go back and relate to you how I became a cook in F Company. While I was in Hawaii, I worked at Red Hill oil construction area where they were building huge tanks to store oil for Pearl Harbor. And I worked as a busboy, and that got into my Army record. So when I reached Camp Shelby, Sergeant Masuda says, I'm going to promote you to squad sergeant. And I was very happy that I made the grade. But then the next day, Captain Akins called me to his office and says, Oba, he's a southerner, says, Mass Sergeant wants you in the kitchen. I said, sir, I came to fight and not to cook. And he says, Oba, you want to be court-martialed? So, and everything went through my mind. Oh, what a disgrace. I will be court-martialed, sent home. What am I going to tell my parents? So before I could think further, I said, yes, sir. And I went down into the mess hall, and I didn't know anything about cooking. So that was my initiation to becoming a cook, and I stayed a cook. And the fellow who took over my place as sergeant, Hideo Yamada, got shot right through his head in France. And the guy who took Hideo's place got shot also. So today I tell myself, the only reason I'm alive and able to tell stories is that I became a cook. And cooks don't get killed.
I had the most Japanese education. I was in charge of interrogation of prisoner of war. That was my primary function. So I started my standard interrogation. First name, rank, serial number, and then extended to where it come from. Checking their date of birth and the location. It points out, we might be a classmate, same age. So little by little lead into all the questions and respond to my question seem to indicate these guys are my classmate. So before I announced my identity, I told them, said, you went to so-and-so school? I said, yes. There was a so-and-so teacher, do you remember? So they look at me, say, how come you know that sensei name? Okay, I'm a graduate of a United States Army Military Intelligence School, and as a non-commissioned officer, I know everything about you guys, so don't lie to me, So I say, okay, yes, hi. So I say, Sensei, we mentioned Sensei. I told him, I met Sensei not too long ago and he's all right. So from that time, I started telling them, I say, in your class, there was a guy named Takejiro Higa from Shimabuku. You remember him? They said, huh? You even know him? I said, I told you, I know everything about you guys. So I said, yeah, there was a guy named Takejiro Higa. Say, what happened to him? Say, one guy said, see, I think he went back to Hawaii. And we haven't met for 4 or 5 years, so I don't know if what happened to him. Say, if you meet him today, do you think you recognize him? No, I don't know. Maybe we haven't seen each other for 4 or 5 years now. I see. So you don't know him. So at that time, I look at them squarely, I say, God damn, don't you recognize your own classmate? He said, huh? That took me real hard because, as I mentioned earlier, I literally ran away from Okinawa when I was 16, see? If I didn't run away, or if I went back to Okinawa in 1940, I might be in the same boat. So that kind of hit me real hard. So 3 of us grabbed each other's shoulder and we had a little cry. I don't mind telling you. It was a real emotional, even to this day when I talk about it.
Befontaine was this little village. Actually, you know, I didn't know what was going on because we'd be going around in the hills, around and around. It seemed like we were lost. And there it was bad because we were kind of cut off and we didn't have any food. We were hungry. And we really took a big beating. I mean, hardly anybody was left, and I lost one sergeant. Afterwards, I found out that that was kind of a key victory when we took Vifontaine. But to us, I mean, it was just a big beating that we took, you know. I mean, that's the way we see the war. Officers and enlistments don't look at the war the same way. I was sent as a replacement to the 100 before the 442 went over. So, and that was kind of good too because, well, I don't know if it was good, but we were able to learn a lot of things from the old timers in the 100. You know, they never boss me around. You know, they talk in pidgin. You know, pidgin's a nice way of talking. You know, you feel kind of close. So they just tell me what had to be done, and tried my best to, you know, to not let them down.
Later on, after the war, my Japanese brother, my brother in the Japanese Navy, came to visit us on several occasions, but you know, just a polite indifference because I know what kind of grief he caused my father, even though he's my blood brother. There in the sanctity of Punchbowl, he and I discussed our past, you know, not about the war, but not who won or who lost, but the utter futility of wars. Here I look at him. That's the first time I really talked to him now. He's been to Hawaii a few times, but that's the first time I gathered enough courage to ask him point blank what happened. Then I look at him, I look at his wife, and tears came down my eyes. I says, here he is, he's my enemy. He suffered just as much as me. He suffered. You know, he was captured by the Dutch, he was bombed by the Allies, and his wife is receiving medical treatment and all that. I said, hey, let bygones be bygones. And I thought I suffered because my father suffered, I saw his suffering, my wife was interned, and I have 6 of us in the family, my brother and I, and 4 brothers-in-laws, all in the 442nd, all of us wounded in combat, and all of us were Purple Heart veterans, you know. So I said to myself, and as I'm shaking his hands and both of us crying, I said, gee, the utter futility of war, nobody wins.
How can you tell someone, Pop, don't be proud of me. Don't be ashamed of me because I did what I thought I had to do, but don't be proud of me because we got nothing to be proud of over there, what we're doing. But you don't, at least I couldn't say that to my family. So you just shut up. And I really wanted to talk about it to someone.
Even among ourselves. I think combat is such a horrible experience that few, if ever, want to talk about what happens in combat. And so there is this agreement of silence. And not only do they not talk to their wives, their children, or anybody else, but we didn't even talk to each other.
So the only people that you can really relate and empathize with are other Vietnam vets. And when they get together, they want to talk about the war. So it was like talking about cancer at the dinner table, you know, or like you were an ex-con or something.
I can recall one instance where an artillery shell hit the individual running in front of me. He was 10 yards away. His body absorbed the shell because the shell exploded. His upper half of the body from his waist disappeared. The legs kept running for 10 more yards. But I'm just saying that as one example. But you see that constantly all the time around you, horribly mangled bodies of not some stranger, your friend, your buddy, the one that saved your life maybe hours ago or days ago. See, and so we're asking people to reproduce this nightmare in their brain. They don't want to. They hate talking about that. It's so horrible they can't talk about it. So their silence, in a sense, makes possible wars. Because the people who write about wars glorify it. They honor it. They make it like as if it's some great, great thing. And it's not. It's not at all. And so for every third generation or second generation, the young kids are ready to go to war again. And they think they're going to be another John Wayne and Rambo, except when the first bullet flies, all of a sudden they realize, hey, this isn't what I thought it was, and it isn't what I'm looking for, it isn't what I asked for.
Other than the Highlands Inn in Carmel, California, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington is my favorite place. And no matter what your politics are, no matter what your viewpoint of the Vietnam War is or was, when you go there and you see panel after panel of over 58,000 names of young American men and women that were consumed by the Vietnam War, I think it really strikes home. That's all the books, all the films, the Rambos and the Chuck Norris films. You look at the names, that's what it costs the country. And you know, for every name that there is a mother or a father and sisters and brothers and a girlfriend. Maybe someone whose name was on that wall was going to find a cure for cancer or write a symphony that we would remember for the ages. They're not going to do that. And so, although I had been there on a number of occasions, when my son was 8 years old, I took him, we went on vacation to Washington, and I took him to the wall. Again, even at 8, when I told him that every name etched on there represented a soldier that had been killed in Vietnam, he was dumbstruck. He was awed by this. And we went to this one place where 37 names were there that were my people, that they were men in my company that were killed August the 24th, 1968. And you know, until then, again, I'm the macho pop, right? Every time I go there, I weep. And that was the first time my son had ever seen me cry. And it upset him. But again, as we were leaving, he said, Dad, why did we fight the North Vietnamese? And I had to tell him, I don't know, son. And then he said, why did you have to fight when so-and-so's dad didn't have to fight? And I said, I don't know, son. And then finally he said, when I grow up to be a man, well, I have to go off to fight the war. And I said, I don't know, son, I hope not.